Chapter 461. David smiled lightly. Whatever, what I want, I don't have it here. What do you mean? Let me tell you, this is the largest restaurant in Anhe town. If you don't have anything, even if you drink Mautai Wuliangye, you can have it here. Chen Guzi's face turned cold. Tell me, what do you want? I don't like to drink liquor, I usually only drink Romani Conti. David said. What god? What is that? Chen Guzi was stunned. Seeing Chen Guzi like that, Sonia couldn't help laughing, and David just laughed without saying a word. Chen Guzi frowned, looked at the waiter beside him and said, what is he talking about? Does our hotel have it? The waiter shook his head. That's red wine, our hotel doesn't have it. It turned out to be red wine, what's so good about that stuff? It smells like swill. Chen Guzi looked disgusted, but then said to the waiter, we don't have any in the hotel, so go out and buy some more bottles. Come over. With that said, Chen Guzi took out a wad of money from his wallet and photographed it on the table. There were thousands of dollars. The waiter looked at the money, did not dare to take it, and was not moved. Damn, I told you to buy wine, didn't you hear? Seeing the waiter not moving, Chen Guzi was angry. Brother dog, the money is not enough. The waiter said quietly. How much is a bottle of red wine? I'll give you a few thousand more. Chen Guzi took out some money and slapped it on the table. But the waiter still didn't take it or move, which angered Chen Guzi and kicked the waiter fiercely. Brother go, the money is really not enough. I see if your kid doesn't understand that I don't understand, do you want to make money from it? Chen Guzi stood up at once. You don't have to force him, Anhe town doesn't have this wine, and the money is really not enough. A bottle of Romane Conti costs 300,000. David said to the Chen Guzi. How much? 300,000. Chen Guzi looked at David in shock, and then his face became angry. David, what are you pretending to be me here? You drink 300,000 bottles of wine. Blow it. Who doesn't know that you just got out of prison, thinking that you rent a Mercedes-Benz car, and you don't know where to find a lady to accompany the wine, so you can pretend to be a big money. If you are not Yingxi's cousin, I will tell you to get out of Anhe in minutes town. Hearing the words of Miss Peiju, Sonia's face suddenly turned cold. Xiao Chen, calm down. Aunt David hurriedly stood up, then looked at David and said, David, you just got out of jail, you didn't do well, and no one laughed at you, just find a good job in the future. They are all relatives, you don't have to pretend, and you drink 300,000 bottles of wine, why don't you drink 1,000,000? How can there be such an expensive wine in this world? David, shut your mouth and stop talking nonsense. Seeing that David's second aunt was a little angry, Barbara hurriedly said to David. Eldest sister, your David really needs to take care of it. What do you think he is pretending to be in front of us? I've watched him since I was a child. I don't know how much he weighs. When I come back this time, I don't want to let him. Now that we are developing so well here, we are still waiting for demolition, let Xiao Chen find him a good job, earn money to marry a wife and have a baby, and live a peaceful and stable life. Aunt David said to Barbara. We'll talk about this later, let's order food first. Barbara didn't want to talk about this topic, so she picked up the menu and said. Soon, he ordered a table of dishes and asked for a few bottles of white wine. Chen Guzi kept posing, just waiting for others to toast him. Xiao Chen, who is the manager Kui of the private room? No. One just mentioned. Aunt David asked towards Chen Guzi. Chapter 462. Oh, then Manager Kui is a big man. He has the final say in the development of our Anhe town. Whoever's house will be valued and how much it will cost will be in his hands. He only needs to sign it, and it will be done. I am now pack some projects under him. Chen Guzi explained. Hey, that's really a big man. Let's see if you can talk to Manager Kui and find a job for David. After all, they are all relatives from now on. Aunt David is still worried about David's work. Chen Guzi glanced at David and snorted coldly. If I look at his attitude just now, I would be too lazy to care about him, but for Yingxi's face, I will tell Manager Kui. Chen Guzi said, stood up with a glass of wine, and then continued, I'll go next door to toast Manager Kui, you can drink it yourself. Chen Guzi left, and only David's family and his second aunt's family were left in the whole box. David, the second aunt's words are ugly, but it's all for your own good. Your parents don't have a job now, so they are counting on you to support them. If you are not motivated, who will your parents expect in the future? You said you came home. What's the use of renting a luxury car and a girlfriend? Is face so important to you? No one in the village knows that you have just come out of prison. Aunt David said to David bitterly. Second aunt, Mom. What are you talking about? Sister Sonia is really brother David's girlfriend. What is renting? Listen to Chen Guzi's nonsense. Chen Yingxia hurriedly said to her mother. Chen Yingxia knew that Sonia was definitely not rented by David, because no rented girlfriend would wear a big name, and the Cartier earrings given to her were very valuable, but Chen Guzi didn't know the goods and made a fuss. Second sister, Sonia is really David's girlfriend, we all know that. Barbara also hurriedly explained to Aunt David. When second Aunt David heard this, she immediately looked embarrassed and could only smile apologetically at Sonia. Sonia also smiled slightly, but didn't take it to heart, because she knew second Aunt David was also for David's good. David, if you have found such a good girlfriend, then you should work hard. I have heard from your mother long ago that you have no job right now. If Chen Go can find you one later, if you have a good job, you can do it well, although this place is not as good as the city of Horrendal, but there is still a bright future. Aunt David continued to persuade David. Second Aunt, I understand what you are saying. I won't say it beforehand. Let's talk about Yingxia. David intends to tell a few elders about making Chen Yingxia regret his marriage. What's the matter with Yingxia? Second Aunt David asked with a puzzled look. Brother David, don't talk nonsense. Chen Yingxia's face changed suddenly with fright. David ignored Chen Yingxia, but continued to say to his second aunt, Yingxia is only 19 years old now, and it's too early to get married. Hey, you said that this child can't even go to school, so what if he doesn't get married? It's like this in the countryside, you can't compare with the city. Aunt David sighed and said. Where is Yingxia not going to school? That Chen Guzi was making trouble in the school, making the school not dare to welcome Xia, and he also used you as a threat, forcing Yingxia to have no choice, so he agreed to marry him. Who is Chen Guzi, don't you know? David said loudly. Hearing what David said, everyone was shocked, including David's parents, who all looked at Chen Yingxia. Yingxia, is everything David said true? Aunt David looked at Chen Yingxia and asked. Mom, don't worry about it, things have come to this time, it really doesn't matter anymore. Chen Yingxia said helplessly. Chapter 463. Hey. Seeing Chen Yingxia like that, they all guessed that it must be true, so they all sighed. The matter is already like this, the wedding is set, what else can I do? Do you regret marriage? They don't dare, what kind of Chen Guzi is, they know too much. Second Aunt, I plan to make Yingxia regret her marriage and send her to Horrendal to study. David said his plan. What are you joking about, repenting with Chen Guzi, isn't that courting death? Aunt David said in surprise. David, don't be fooled. You don't know who Chen Guzi is now. You did this, but you harmed your second aunt's family. Barbara also hurriedly said to David. Chen Baoguo, who had never spoken before, also said at this time, David, Chen Guzi is not as simple as you think, as the so-called strong dragon can't suppress the local snake, don't think that you can settle it by knowing a few people in Horrendal. Chen Guzi. Chen Baoguo knew that David had something to do with him, and with the financial resources of Sonia's family, he must have a lot of power, but this is Anhe Town, not Horrendal, so Chen Guzi is not easy to mess with. I've decided on this matter, you don't have to worry about it. David had made up his mind a long time ago, and he couldn't even settle for a little ba 5 tard, that would be really ridiculous. Brother David, I know you're doing it for my own good, but I don't want to see you take risks, so don't worry about it. Chen Yingxia didn't want to let David take care of it, it really annoyed that Chen Guzi, he can do anything. Yingxia, you are only 19 years old now, do you really accept your fate like this? This is a lifetime thing, do you want to destroy yourself in the hands of Chen Guzi? You should go to school now, and find someone you like in the future. Love your boyfriend instead of compromising, your life is still very long, don't accept your fate, I can definitely help you, don't worry. David said loudly to Chen Yingxia. Chen Yingxia was silent, and everyone stopped talking. Indeed, Chen Yingxia is only 19 years old now, and there is still a long way to go in the future, so it cannot be destroyed by Chen Guzi. Hey. David's second uncle sighed and drank a glass of white wine in one gulp. There are parents who don't care about their children, but sometimes they have to accept the reality. There is no fairness in this world. The strong eat the weak, this is the law of survival. At this moment, Chen Yingxia's cell phone rang. After Chen Yingxia was connected, she hung up quickly, but her face was a little ugly. Yingxia, what's wrong? Aunt David asked with concern. Then Chen Guzi asked me to accompany the wine, I'm a little afraid. Chen Yingxia said with a look of fear. When Aunt David heard this, she stopped talking. What could she say at this time? If you don't let your daughter go there, it will be fun for Chen Guzi. Yingxia, I'll accompany you there, don't worry. David stood up and said. I'll go with you too, don't be afraid. Sonia also got up and said to Chen Yingxia, David, if you go, don't be impulsive, we'll have a long-term plan when we go back. Aunt David persuaded David. Second aunt, don't worry, I know what to do. David nodded and walked with Chen Yingxia to the private room No. 1. Sonia has been comforting Chen Yingxia and telling her not to be afraid. As soon as I walked to the door of the private room No. 1, I heard the noisy drinking sound from inside. David stepped forward and pushed open the box door. At this time in the box, 5 people were drinking. The master was a middle-aged man from the Mediterranean Sea, and Chen Guzi was sitting on the side, toasting with a flattering face. It seems that the middle-aged man in the Mediterranean is the manager Kui. David suddenly opened the door, and everyone in the private room was stunned. Chen Guzi glanced at David, as well as Chen Yingxia and Sonia behind David, and hurriedly said to the middle-aged man in the Mediterranean, Manager Kui, this is my daughter-in-law's cousin, he must know that Manager Kui is here, and he came here to make a toast. Chapter 464. After Chen Guzi finished speaking, he hurriedly said to Chen Yingxia, Yingxia, come here and pour a glass of wine for Manager Kui. Chen Yingxia was trembling with fright. Sonia took Chen Yingxia's hand and felt that Chen Yingxia's hand was shaking so badly. Yingxia Xiao, ignorant, let me come. Sonia took the initiative to stand out, then picked up the liquor on the table and walked over. Seeing this, Chen Guzi raised the corner of his mouth. He was even more convinced of his guess. Sonia poured the wine so proactively. Seeing like this, she was not the escort girl. When Manager Kui saw Sonia, he narrowed his eyes, looked at Sonia squintingly, and then lifted the glass. Dog, who is this beautiful lady? Manager Kui asked Chen Guzi. Oh, it's my wife's cousin's girlfriend. Chen Guzi said hurriedly. He didn't dare to say that Sonia was an escort girl. After all, a big man like Manager Kui didn't like that kind of romantic girl for a long time, and he liked this even more. Where does Manager Kui work? Sonia asked while pouring wine for Manager Kui. Manager Kui is the manager of the Su Group, and the Su Group is the leading enterprise in Horrendal. Without waiting for Manager Kui to say, Chen Guzi introduced with pride. Sonia raised the corner of her mouth and smiled coldly. She already knew that this place was developed by her own family, so she deliberately asked this question to see if this guy belonged to her own company. Miss, what's your name? Manager Kui looked at Sonia slyly and asked. My name is Sonia Su. Sonia said with a smile. Sonia. I saw that Manager Kui frowned slightly, but quickly said, it's really a good name, it's the same name as our eldest lady. There are too many people with the same name and surname now. What's the use? It's different. She is a wealthy eldest lady. Chen Guzi laughed. Then Manager Kui poured Sonia down the wine, and then continued to pick up the glass and said, the beauty pours the wine, it's a pleasure to drink, another drink. But this time, Sonia's face turned cold, and she threw it at Manager Kui. Manager Kui screamed and jumped up in a hurry, while Chen Guzi hurriedly wiped Manager Kui's clothes, then glared at Sonia and said, UFC King seek death, if you dare, sprinkle it on Manager Kui. Little girl, I think you don't want to live anymore. Manager Kui glared at Sonia. I don't think it's you who don't want to live. Let you come over to supervise the development and manage the company, but you are so virtuous, I think you have done it. As Sonia said that, she took out her mobile phone and called Ruben. You, what do you mean? Manager Kui was taken aback and asked Sonia. Nothing else, you take my family's money, but don't do anything real, I let my dad open you. Sonia said coldly. You, are you the eldest lady? Manager Kui's eyes instantly showed panic. Chen Guzi was also surprised, but then comforted the Manager Kui. Manager Kui, don't be afraid, she is definitely not the eldest miss of the Su family, then David is a reformed through labor prisoner who has just been released from prison. If she is the eldest of the Su family miss, how is it possible to be with the prisoners of labor reform? I must have heard you say that she has the same name and surname as the eldest Miss Su family, so I scare you. When Manager Kui heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief, and then looked at Sonia coldly. Little girl, if you have the ability, try to get on the phone. If you can't fire me today, I will let you serve me well for a few nights. Manager Kui, don't worry, I will arrange this, she can't escape. Chen Guzi hurriedly flattered. Chen Yingxia at the back was terrified. Although she knew that Sonia had some identity, she did not dare to associate Sonia with the eldest Miss Su family. After all, how could she like David with her identity? Chapter 465. Brother David. Chen Yingxia nervously grabbed David's arm. David smiled slightly. Don't worry, because your sister-in-law is really the eldest miss of the Su family. Chen Yingxia was stunned when she heard it. At this time, Sonia's phone was already open, so she said directly, Dad, did you arrange for a person named Kui to manage the development here in Anhe Town? I don't know, it's all arranged by your Uncle Lou, what's wrong? Ruben asked with a puzzled look. During this time, Ruben has seldom managed the company's affairs, focusing on taking care of his body. If it wasn't for David last time, he would have lost his life. Don't worry, I'll call Uncle Lou. Sonia hung up the phone. At this time, Manager Kui's face was already ugly, because his immediate boss was indeed named Lou. Chen Guzi saw that Manager Kui looked bad, so he hurriedly comforted him, Manager Kui, don't be afraid, I think this little girl can act. However, Manager Kui ignored Chen Guzi and stared at Sonia with a cold sweat on his forehead. I saw Sonia dial the number again, and soon a hearty voice came from the opposite side, eldest niece, why did you remember to call your Uncle Lou? This Uncle Lou was a veteran who followed Ruben to fight the country very early, and he was also one of Ruben's most trusted people, otherwise he would not be assured of handing over the company to him. But when Manager Kui heard the voice coming from the phone, his legs went weak and he collapsed. Hey, Manager Kui, are you alright? Chen Guzi, who was beside him, didn't realize what was going on, so he hurriedly supported Manager Kui and said that Manager Kui was trembling and was speechless. Uncle Lou, did you arrange for a guy named Kui to take care of you in Anhe Town? Sonia asked Uncle Lou. Yeah, what's wrong? Uncle Lou said. I fired him, this guy bullied me, forced me to pour him a drink, and wanted me to sleep with him. Sonia said angrily. What? This thing dares to let you pour him a drink and let you sleep with him. It's really FCU King wrong. You wait for me to clean him up for you. Uncle Lou hung up the phone and called Manager Kui. Soon, Manager Kui's phone rang. Seeing his phone ringing, Manager Kui trembled and didn't dare to answer it. At this time, Chen Guzi also seemed to have discovered something, and looked at Sonia in surprise. Finally, Manager Kui answered the phone with trembling. Kui Baldzi, you FCU King dare to ask the eldest lady to pour you wine and sleep with you, you are so FCU King good. As soon as the phone was connected, Uncle Lou's roar came out. Lou, Mr. Lou, I don't know he's the eldest miss. Manager Kui wants to cry without tears at this time. Don't FCU King say it, you were fired, I'll send someone to replace you tomorrow, you roll back for me to accept the punishment, and see if I don't break your leg. After Uncle Lou finished speaking, he immediately hung up the phone. Mr. Lou, President Lou. Then Manager Kui wanted to say something, but the other side was already busy. Sonia looked at Manager Kui with a half smile but said, why, do you want me to accompany you? PFFT. Then Manager Kui suddenly knelt in front of Sonia. Miss, I was wrong, please forgive me, I was wrong. Bah, you scum, how could I spare you? Sonia spat fiercely. Manager Kui suddenly collapsed to the ground, his face ashen. When the few people who were drinking with them saw this, they ran away, and Chen Guzi also hid far away. Sonia turned around and walked out. When passing by Chen Yingxia, she smiled faintly. Yingxia, let's go. Chapter 466. At this time, Chen Yingxia's eyes were still wide open, and she looked at Sonia with an incredible face. Miss Su, Chen Guzi also hurriedly followed. But Sonia ignored him, and then Chen Guzi directly took David's arm. Cousin, I really misunderstood just now, we are relatives now, how could I watch my relatives being bullied? You say this is Kui how to clean up, you just need a word, and I'll have someone chop him right away. Chen Guzi's effort to get down to the ground directly caused Manager Kui, who was sitting on the ground, to pass out angrily. David just gave Chen Guzi a cold look, ignored him, and went back to the second private room. That Chen Guzi didn't mind either, and followed closely behind. After entering the private room, Chen Guzi hurriedly opened the chair. Cousin, sit down. Seeing Chen Guzi being so polite to David, whether it is David's second aunt or Barbara, it feels very strange. After David sat down, he said coldly to Chen Guzi, how do you force my cousin to marry you? Chen Guzi was stunned for a moment, then licked his face and said, Cousin, what are you talking about? Yingxia and I are in free love, I didn't force him. Stop talking nonsense, your wedding with Yingxia is void, and Yingxia will not marry you. David said coldly. Cousin, aren't you willing? David frowned. Chen Guzi gritted his teeth, glanced at Chen Yingxia, and finally nodded and said, okay, the wedding is void, we won't get married. After that, Chen Guzi turned around and wanted to leave. Did I let you go? David asked. What else do you want? Chen Guzi's face was also a little ugly at this time. I cut off a hand myself, I will not pursue this matter. David said lightly. When Chen Guzi heard this, he was furious. David, don't go too far. David, forget it, since he promised not to get married, don't worry about it. When second Aunt David heard this, she hurriedly persuaded David. Brother David, forget it, if I don't get married, I'll be content. Chen Yingxia also persuaded David. After all, if Chen Guzi was in a hurry, he would dare to do anything. You don't have to worry about it. David finished speaking, looked at Chen Guzi and said, I'm just too much, what can you do? If you cut off a hand yourself, you can still save your life. If I do it, your life will be lost. Chen Guzi slapped the table suddenly. David, do you think you can do anything if you are a young lady on the list? This is Anhe Town, and I can make you die without a single phone call, even if it is Sue. What can my family do to me? I'm from Lord Hu of Horrendal, and I believe you must have heard the name of Lord Hu. Have you heard that the underground emperor of Horrendal? David nodded. You're still a little knowledgeable, so don't push me too hard, otherwise no one can keep you. Chen Guzi said with a cold smile. I don't need someone to protect me, I just need to protect myself. Keep one hand, get out, or you will die. David said calmly. Damn, I'll give you a face. Chen Guzi scolded angrily, picked up the wine bottle and smashed it at David. But before he could make a move, David grabbed the bottle of wine as soon as he reached out his hand, and then smashed it on Chen Guzi's head. Chen Guzi's head was suddenly bleeding, and he sat on the ground with a scream. This time, everyone was startled. As long as Sonia smiled, she was not worried at all. UFC King, wait for me. Chen Guzi roared, took out his phone and started calling. Your name is a man, so I'll call him too. Don't you know Lin Tianyu? I'll ask him if he knows you. David said, took out his mobile phone. Chapter 467. HMPH, you are a little white-faced, and you deserve to know Hu Yi. Even if you are the boss of the Su group, Hu Yi will not ignore him. Chen Guzi snorted coldly. David ignored him, but called Lin Tianyu directly. Mr. Chen, Lin Tianyu was in the provincial capital and got the call right away. There is a man named Chen Go in Anhe Town. He said he knew you and was your subordinate. Do you know him? David asked. Anhe Town. Lin Tianyu pondered for a while. I don't know, I will take care of the place below Horrendal. Ask your subordinates, who knows this Chen Go, and now this kid is using the name of Juitong to make a fortune. David said coldly. Okay, I'll check right away. After Lin Tianyu finished speaking, he hung up the phone and hurriedly checked. Soon, Lin Tianyu called back. Mr. Chen, I asked, and Biaozi said he knew someone from Anhe Town named Chen Go, but he didn't know him very well. Biaozi. David remembered, this Biaozi is the cousin of his classmate Yuan Hua, who cut off a hand at that time. I'll send you the location and let him come and handle it in person. After David finished speaking, he sent Lin Tianyu a location. David, have you finished pretending? I'm telling you, my people will be here soon, so just wait to die. Chen Guzi said viciously. David ignored him, but said to his second aunt's family and his parents, let's eat, ignore him. But now in this situation, who can eat it? David, let's go. David's second aunt said with a face full of fear. Go, none of you want to go. Chen Guzi stood at the door and roared loudly. We don't have to go, let's talk after dinner, second aunt, don't be afraid. David persuaded his second aunt. But no matter how David persuaded, no one was in the mood to eat. After more than 20 minutes, there was a sudden chaotic footsteps rushing upstairs from downstairs. My people are here, you wait for me. Chen Guzi looked proud. This time, Aunt David's family as well as Barbara and Chen Baoguo's faces changed color. Soon, more than a dozen people rushed in with sticks, all of them tattooed and menacing. Brother dog, who messed with you? One of them asked Chen Guzi. Take a good look at this place, and no one is allowed to let go. I will start killing people today. Chen Guzi had a grim expression, then looked at Sonia and said, Miss Su, you'd better get out of the way, don't splatter your blood for a while, don't interfere in this matter, I believe your Su family doesn't want to be with the tiger either. Is the Lord the enemy? I don't care. Sonia shook her head. Chen Yingxia looked at Sonia in shock. Sister-in-law, you can't ignore it, or my brother will die. Don't worry, your brother is very lucky. Sonia said with a smile. This time, Chen Yingxia was a little dumbfounded. If Sonia doesn't care about David, then what kind of backing does David have? Aunt David didn't know what to do at this time, so she could only follow Chen Guzi. Xiao Chen, I apologize to you for David, don't. Go away. Chen Guzi pushed Aunt David aside. David hurriedly helped his second aunt, and then looked at Chen Guzi coldly and said, you have lost the last hope of life, so do it yourself. Don't FC you King bluff me, I'm scared. Chen Guzi didn't care at all, and shouted loudly, "Aren't you arrogant and also called people? Where are your people?" "My people will be here soon," David said lightly. "Okay, I'll give you 10 minutes, and I'll wait for your people to come. I'd like to see who dares to oppose me in Anhe Town." Chen Guzi moved a chair and sat down, snorted coldly. Chapter 468. Soon, 10 minutes later, Chen Guzi looked at David with a sneer. "I think you are just bragging. Where are your people?" But as soon as Chen Guzi finished speaking, he felt the ground shaking, and the whole building seemed to start shaking. "Brother dog, there are a lot of people outside." At this time, a younger brother said to Chen Guzi. Chen Guzi was startled, and hurriedly looked through the window, and found that there was a crowd of people, and the entire restaurant had been surrounded. Chen Guzi was shocked, but he calmed down quickly, and said to the somewhat flustered younger brother, "Don't worry, it doesn't matter how many people come, I am covered by Tiger Lord, who dares to touch me." After Chen Guzi finished speaking, the sound of footsteps came, and someone hurried upstairs. "Brother Biao." Chen Guzi was stunned when he saw the person coming. The person who came was Biaozi with a broken left hand. At this time, Biaozi had a solemn expression on his face. He didn't even look at Chen Guzi, but walked directly to David and respectfully shouted, "Mr. Chen." Now Biaozi is extremely frightened. His left hand was cut off because he offended David. Now Lin Tianyu has rushed him here again. When Chen Guzi saw that Biaozi treated David so respectfully, he was dumbfounded. "Biaozi, do you know this guy?" David pointed at Chen Guzi and asked. "No, but not very familiar," Biaozi said truthfully. "I don't want to see him anymore. As for the others, broken legs." As soon as David's voice fell, Chen Guzi fell to his knees at once. As soon as Chen Guzi knelt down, his men all knelt down. "David, no, big brother, dad, grandpa. Grandpa David, I beg you, spare my life." Chen Guzi desperately kowtowed to David. "Chen Guzi, didn't you say that you belong to Lin Tianyu? Now that his people are here, what about your arrogance?" David sneered. "Grandpa David, I was wrong, I was wrong." Chen Guzi kept begging for mercy. David snorted coldly, turned around, and Biaozi flashed a cold light in his eyes, took out a dagger and stabbed at Chen Guzi. "Don't scare my family," David said lightly. "Understood, Mr. Chen." Biaozi nodded, and then said to his subordinate, "Drag these people to the next door." Soon, there was a burst of mourning from the next door. David's second aunt's family was blinded at this time, and Chen Yingsha's eyes widened, looking at David in disbelief. On the way back, Aunt David looked at David and seemed to have something to say, but she didn't say anything in the end. Early the next morning, David was going to take Chen Yingxia to Horrendal to go to school. Because David really has a lot of things to do now, otherwise he would stay with his parents in his hometown for a longer time. At the same time, the village also started broadcasting, saying that the houses of each family will be re-evaluated, and this time they will be demolished according to national standards, and there will be no forced demolition or malicious price reduction. Every household in Chenjia village is excited. David took Chen Yingxia to Horrendal, and through Ling Zhenchuan's relationship, he found a high school for Chen Yingxia to study at. David and Sonia accompanied Ruben in Horrendal for one day, and then went straight to the provincial capital the next day. The Yawang Mansion and Xuanyu Valley have not been dealt with, and David has not investigated the matter of Hengshan Lingxi, so he does not dare to stay in Horrendal for a long time. "I'm sorry, I made you run around with me, I can't be at home with my father." On the way, David followed Sonia apologetically. "Marry a chicken, follow a chicken, marry a dog, follow a dog, marry a grasshopper, who makes me like you?" Sonia smiled lightly. David also smiled with love on his face. "Don't worry, I will give you a stable life soon, the two of us have been living for hundreds of years, and let you give me 100 children." "Bah, I won't give birth to you so much, and I'm not a pig." Sonia rolled her eyes at David. Chapter 469. Kyoto, White House. Bai Zontang was standing beside him with a low expression on his face, and there were 6 or 7 people sitting in the hall at this time. "Zontang, tell me what happened in Zhongbei in detail." Above the main seat, an old man with a gray beard said. "This old man is Bai Shushan, the head of the Bai family." "Okay, Grandpa." Bai Zontang nodded, and then continued. "A young man in his 20s came out of Zhongbei, called David, who is very powerful. At this martial arts gathering, he easily killed Zhang Zhengde. And the master Qin Feng brought, all of them were easily killed, and this person can also refine pills, his pill recipe is very mysterious, and the people in Yaowangfu have no way to know the refining method with pills. The most important thing is the jade pendant of the Yin family. Now it's in the hands of David. At that time, it was to compete for the jade pendant. Those people from the Qin family were killed. Fortunately, I was alert and saw that things were not going well, so I didn't conflict with him. But this David wants the Yaowangfu to hand over all the medicinal materials, otherwise, the Yaowangfu will be flattened. Just after Bai Zontang finished speaking, there was a lot of discussion. So young, with such strength, isn't this a genius? Zontang, are you investigating this kid? Bai Zontang's father, asked. Dad, I've checked, all the resumes of that kid are here. Bai Zontang said, took out some documents and distributed them to several people present. Everyone looked at the document and frowned, because David's resume was blank from childhood to adulthood, and he didn't even have experience in martial arts. How could he suddenly become so powerful? Dad, look at. Bai Zon took the document to Bai Shushan, and then said with a puzzled face, this kid has a mediocre resume. He has been in prison for 3 years, shouldn't he have such strong strength? Bai Shushan looked at the document, quickly saw the problem, and said to everyone, didn't you find out, after this David got out of the prison, his life has undergone tremendous changes. It is very likely that this kid has been in prison for 3 years. Adventures. What can I do in 3 years? I'm afraid I can't even practice Qi. Bai Zon frowned. Qi Jin. Bai Shushan smiled slightly, I'm sure that David is not practicing Qi Jin, he is not a martial artist. Bai Shushan's words made everyone stunned and looked at Bai Shushan with a puzzled face. Grandpa, is he a warlock? If he can make alchemy, he is likely to be a warlock. Bai Zontang asked. Impossible, even if the warlock is skilled, but like you said, when David dealt with Zhang Zheng and the grandmasters of the Qin family, he didn't use any magic, it was all close combat, how could it be possible? It's a warlock. Bai Zon immediately retorted. Bai Zontang thought about it, and it was indeed the case, so he could only look at Bai Shushan, it seemed that Bai Shushan knew something. Seeing everyone looking at him, Bai Shushan asked, apart from knowing that there are warriors and warlocks in this world, do you know there are other types of people? Everyone shook their heads. I tell you, there are not only warriors and warlocks in this world, but also a kind of person who is a monk, but such people are extremely rare. This David is likely to be a monk. As soon as Bai Shushan's voice fell, everyone was stunned. Grandpa, what is a monk? Bai Zontang asked. It's an immortal cultivator. Bai Shushan said, suddenly there was a hint of envy and yearning in his eyes. Immortal cultivator. Everyone exclaimed in surprise. Grandpa, you said that David is an immortal. Are there really immortals in this world? Bai Zontang was the most excited. If there really was an immortal in the world, would he also have the opportunity to become an immortal and be able to live forever? Chapter 470. To be precise, he is just a cultivator, and he has not yet become an immortal. I don't know if there are immortals in this world, but I know that there are a group of immortal cultivators, but these people are hidden in the downtown area and never expose themselves, so very few people know about them. Bai Shushan explained. Dad, how did you know there were immortal practitioners? Bai Zon asked. Bai Shushan suddenly looked out of the window, and then clearly remembered his memories, and began to slowly say, the jade pendant of the Yin family is actually the spiritual tool of the cultivator. I remember that I was only in my early 20s, young and energetic, and always wanted to worship high people or teachers, so I went out to sea with the Yin family boy, thinking that there will be real masters on the island. However, after a day and a night of sailing at sea, a storm suddenly hit the two of us, and the two of us were washed up on a deserted island, and the boat was stranded. Or when the tide is high, we can go back. I have been on the island for 7 days, the food is good, but the fresh water is gone. We are both dying of thirst, and we are about to die of thirst, but God blesses, it suddenly rains, and we are both happy to collect rainwater. But it was soon discovered that something was wrong, because it was only raining on this island, and there was no rain at all in other places, and there were lightning strikes from time to time, and there were bursts of strange sounds. The two of us searched for the sound, and finally, behind a rock, we saw 2 people fighting. The scene at that time was simply too shocking. I saw one person holding a weapon similar to a big axe. There will be a lightning strike, and the rocks will fly, just like a god descending to earth. And the person on the other side is really holding a flute, and every time it hits the lightning, it makes a rumbling explosion. I have never seen such a fight, it is not a mortal fight at all, it is too scary. It's gone. The two of us were lying on the back of the stone, and neither of us dared to move. It was not until there was no movement that we dared to look up and found that the two of us had long since disappeared. The scene was a mess, and in the rubble, the Yin family boy picked up that jade pendant, it must have been dropped by one of the 2 people. We both know that the jade pendant must be a treasure. Later, when the tide rose, we sailed back again. At that time, I also wanted to get the jade pendant, so I sneaked up on the boy of the Yin family, but I didn't want the jade pendant to flash a red light, and directly put me it was knocked out. When the Yin family boy saw this, he directly regarded the jade pendant as a family heirloom. Everyone listened to Bai Shushan's memories and fell into deep thought. They had never heard Bai Shushan talk about this incident. Grandpa, then why are you so sure that those two are immortal cultivators? Bai Zontang asked in confusion. After I came back, I rummaged through the ancient books and found it. There are still immortal cultivators in this world. What was the fighting situation between those two people at that time if it was not an immortal cultivator? Bai Shushan explained. Bai Zontang stopped talking, then thought for a moment and said, I don't know if David is a cultivator, but that jade pendant is definitely a treasure. At that time, Qin Feng and I shot at the girl wearing jade pendant, and the result was a flash of red light. We both flew out. Bai Shushan's eyes lit up. Then David seems to be a cultivator without a doubt. That Yupei has not been activated in the Yin family for decades, but when it came to David, he immediately activated it once, then David must know about Yupei. Secret. It hasn't been activated for decades. Bai Zontang asked in surprise. Chapter 471. Of course, if the Yin family can let the jade pendant be activated, how can we let the Yin family destroy the family? Bai Shushan said coldly. How is this good? Bai Zon sighed. Everyone fell into contemplation. If David was really a cultivator, what would they use to fight against David? Zontang, you are going to the Zhongbei provincial capital right now, and send him all the medicinal materials of the Yaowangfu, and tell him that our Bai family is willing to pay tribute to the medicinal materials for a long time to help him cultivate. You will remember it for me, and your attitude will be certain. Be humble. If you dare to annoy him, don't blame me for being rude. Bai Shushan finally made up his mind. If David is really a cultivator, then the Bai family must seize this opportunity. If there is a cultivator behind the Bai family, then in the entire capital, which family would dare to fight with the Bai family? Got it, Grandpa. Bai Zontang is not stupid, on the contrary, this Bai Zontang is extremely thoughtful, otherwise at the Zhongbei martial arts gathering, it is his Bai family who will be killed and injured. Bai Zontang rushed to Zhongbei non-stop, and at the same time in the Qin family in Kyoto, Qin Feng was smashing things like crazy. Master, the master is in retreat. Without his orders, none of the four kings of the Qin family have the right to mobilize. The old butler followed Qin Feng helplessly. So many people in our Qin family were killed, and I was trampled underfoot and humiliated. Is this the case? Today I have to take the four great kings away, and then my dad will blame him and ask him to find me directly. Qin Feng said, and was about to rush to a courtyard closed by an iron gate, but was stopped by the old housekeeper. Master, you are releasing the four great kings now. If they are insane, then the Qin family will be doomed. Now only the master can control their minds. The old butler begged bitterly. Get out of the way, I have long since brought reassurance pills from my dad's room, as long as I eat it for the four great Vajra, I will be fine. Qin Feng kicked the old butler and was about to open the iron gate. You Ba Five Tard, your dad is in retreat, so no one can control you. This was a loud shout, which scared Qin Feng to stop immediately. Looking back, I saw a middle-aged man with a face full of flesh glaring at Qin Feng. Uncle 3. When Qin Feng saw the person coming, he suddenly became honest. Qin Feng's third uncle stepped forward and snatched the reassurance pill from Qin Feng's hand. Can you control these four great diamonds at will? I think you are courting death. Third uncle, I really can't take this breath. In Zhongbei, the people I brought with me were killed not to mention, and they were trampled under their feet and humiliated in public. It was the Gu family who hired people to do it. I think the Gu family wanted to take revenge on us, and the jade pendant of the Yin family is also in the hands of the boy named David. At this time, Qin Feng not only didn't feel that Gu Linger had saved her life, but he even slammed it down, all relying on the Gu family. Humph, Gu Wenshan has retired, and his family is in the middle of the road. How dare you seek revenge for my Qin family? I really don't know whether to live or die. Qin Feng's third uncle snorted coldly, and then said to Qin Feng, that jade pendant is not even wanted by the Bai family. Is it? Is the Bai family not moving? There was AF. Art move. Bai Zontang was at the scene at the time, and he was so frightened that he didn't dare to do it. Qin Feng's teeth itched with hatred when he mentioned Bai Zontang. At that time, he proposed to follow Bai Zontang to deal with David, but he didn't expect this kid to be cowardly and sold him directly. This coward of the Bai family has no backbone at all. Uncle Qin Feng also scolded him angrily, and then said to Qin Feng, your dad is in seclusion now, don't make trouble for him, return the key to the old housekeeper, I will let the wild wolf take you to Zhongbei again. When Qin Feng heard this, a look of joy flashed in his eyes. Third uncle, did you really lend me Uncle Wolf? Chapter 472. Of course it's true. I can still lie to you. When has our Qin family been bullied like this? Uncle Chin Feng said with a faint smile. Ha ha ha, that's great. If Uncle Wolf goes, he will definitely kill that kid. Then I will ravage Gu Linger well. Chin Feng laughed wildly. Zhongbei provincial capital. David and Sonia are back. However, David is not in a hurry to go to Hengshan. He has to finish the affairs of the Yaowang mansion first, and then go to Hengshan. Lin Tianyu did not practice day and night every day. After eating the great Huan Dan given by David, Lin Tianyu could feel that his strength was improving by leaps and bounds. It's been 3 days, and the Yaowang mansion hasn't moved yet. It seems that it's time to take a trip. David muttered to himself. At this moment, Chifeng walked over quickly. Mr. Chen, Yaowang's mansion has sent someone, saying that he is asking Mr. Chen to visit Yaowang's mansion. As soon as David heard it, he immediately laughed. I just wanted to go, they sent someone to invite, then go and see. Mr. Chen, do you want me to bring more people? Kai Feng asked in a low voice. It's time to bring more people, so many medicinal materials, there is no way to bring them back if there are fewer people. David said with a smile. Soon, Kai Feng drove David and went straight to the Yaowang mansion, followed by a few trucks, ready to pull the medicinal materials. Mr. Chen, are you sure that the medicine palace will hand over the medicinal materials? On the way, Kai Feng asked in confusion. Whether he pays it or not, I have to get the medicinal materials. If they don't pay it, I will kill them all. Those medicinal materials are not the same as mine. David leaned on the backrest and sneered. Chifeng wasn't talking, David was right, just kill them all. In this society where the weak eat the strong, the weak have no say. Soon, David and the others arrived at the Yaowang mansion, but the scene was not as tense as they thought. They saw Bai Zontang with Sun Simiao and the others, waiting for David at the door. When the car arrived, Bai Zontang stepped forward and opened the door for David himself. Mr. Chen. Bai Zontang respectfully followed David and shouted. This made David somewhat surprised, but he didn't show it. After getting out of the car, he was invited to the hall of the King of Medicine. Bai Zontang invited David to the master's seat, and he sat next to David. As for Sun Simiao and the others, they only had to stand by the side. Let's be straight, I don't like to beat around the bush. David is a little strange, what medicine is sold in this Bai Zontang gourd? If the Bai family compromised and became so respectful just because he killed several grandmasters, David himself would not believe it. With the strength of the Bai family, it was impossible to compromise like this. Mr. Chen, I went back to the Bai family to discuss it. Grandpa said that Mr. Chen is a genius. Only when the medicinal materials are in Mr. Chen's hands can they exert the greatest effect. Therefore, we are willing to dedicate all the medicinal materials of the Yaowang mansion to Mr. Chen, and in the future, the medicinal materials will be given to Mr. Chen. The palace will continue to provide Mr. Chen with medicinal materials. Bai Zontang said. David listened, his brows slightly wrinkled, his eyes stared at Bai Zontang. David couldn't see through this Bai Zontang, and this Bai family. David thought that the Bai family could give him all the medicinal materials of Yaowangfu, even if it's the most ideal result. I didn't expect that the other party would even propose to supply him with medicinal materials in the future. Isn't this what he wants? However, David is not particularly optimistic. He knows that the Bai family cannot make a loss-making business. There must be other attempts or conditions in it. Tell me, what are the conditions of your Bai family? I don't believe your Bai family is so kind. David asked. Chapter 473. Mr. Chen, my grandfather said that I hope that the Bai family can stay together with Mr. Chen in the future. If there is any order from Mr. Chen, I, the Bai family, will do my best. Bai Zontang stood up and bowed to David. David became more and more confused, his eyes stared at Bai Zontang, and his brows were slightly wrinkled. Do you know something? I want to hear the truth. Bai Zontang nodded, then looked at Sun Simiao and said, you all go out, no one is allowed to come in without my order. Sun Simiao nodded, and immediately took someone out, and David also looked at Chifeng, you go out too. Kai Feng also walked out. When only David and Bai Zontang were left in the hall, Bai Zontang bowed and said respectfully, my grandfather said that Mr. Chen is a cultivator and should be respected by others. He also hopes that Mr. Chen can protect my Bai family. Prosperity for all generations. When David heard this, he was immediately surprised. This Bai Zontang's grandfather was the first person to see his identity. No one had ever said that he was an immortal cultivator. And David himself has never met a cultivator during this period of time. They are all warriors and warlocks. David has some doubts. In this world, he and Irvin are the only cultivators. Could it be that your grandfather is also an immortal cultivator? Or has he seen an immortal cultivator? David asked excitedly. If he can see a monk, then David will not feel lonely anymore. He can find someone to talk to, and find common topics. Moreover, David knows little about many things about cultivating immortals. He really wants to ask someone. Bai Zontang shook his head. My grandfather is not a cultivator, but he did see. Soon, Bai Zontang told David what Bai Shusin had told him. David was discouraged after hearing it. He saw it decades ago, and now where can he find it? It seems that if he wants to know more, he will have to wait until July 15th to go to an uninhabited island, and he does not know what the big opportunity that the Irvin is talking about. There is also his own biological mother. David always feels that his biological mother is not dead, but still alive, but just locked up somewhere. David himself doesn't know why he feels this way, he can't tell. Your grandfather guessed right, I am indeed a cultivator. David did not hide it from Bai Zontang. Since the Bai family treats each other sincerely, David does not intend to hide it from them. Whether it is sincere or not, at this time both parties are at his mutual benefit. With the improvement of strength, David needs more and more medicinal materials. Hearing that David agreed, Bai Zontang's eyes lit up, his eyes were full of envy and surprise, and he followed David with some stammer. Mr. Chen, can you tell me how immortal cultivators practice? Bai Zontang is very curious, after all, this is the first time he has heard of immortal cultivators. You warriors practice the exercises, and you have practiced internal energy. You rely on constant training to generate energy in your dantian. What I need in my practice is spiritual energy, which is converted into spiritual energy and stored in my dantian. Just like those warlocks, they also need spiritual energy, but the amount they need is very small, and more is just using the formation method. David followed Bai Zontang to explain. Oh, I see. Mr. Chen wants these medicinal materials. Do these medicinal materials have spiritual energy in them and can help Mr. Chen practice? Bai Zontang suddenly realized. David nodded. Yes, but only medicinal materials that are more than 100 years old can produce aura. Now there are too few auras in the world, and I can only use the aura from other objects to cultivate. Chapter 474. Mr. Chen, if you cultivators have reached the end of your cultivation, are you still immortals? Can you fly to the sky, and can you live forever? Bai Zontang is like a primary school student asking for knowledge, constantly asking curiously. David smiled and shook his head. Actually, I don't know much about it. I don't even know where the end of immortality is. Bai Zontang suddenly felt that he had asked too many questions, and was a little rude, and hurriedly apologized. Mr. Chen, I'm just too curious and a little presumptuous, I'm so sorry. David smiled lightly. It's okay. After the two chatted for a while, Bai Zontang shouted, come in. Sun Simiao brought people in. Sun Simiao, let me tell you, in the future, the entire Yaowang mansion will obey Mr. Chen's orders. No matter what medicinal materials you want, you must first let Mr. Chen choose. If anyone dares to refuse, kill. Bai Zontang said to Sun Simiao with a cold face. Understood, second young master. Sun Simiao nodded. Go and load the medicinal materials to Mr. Chen. Bai Zontang said. Sun Simiao hurriedly said to the housekeeper, Old Chu, go and arrange for someone to load the car, and load all the medicinal materials. After the order was completed, Sun Simiao looked at Bai Zontang, then at David, and opened his mouth to stop talking. Palace Master Sun, just say what you have to say. David said to Sun Simiao. Mr. Chen asks you, just say it directly, what is it like to be hesitant? Bai Zontang reprimanded Sun Simiao. Yes, yes, yes. Sun Simiao nodded again and again, and then said to Bai Zontang and David, second young master, Mr. Chen, the four elders of Xuanyu Valley came to Tianfeng town a few days ago, and stayed near the ring for a while. Just leave. Damn, these guys must have come to trouble Mr. Chen. I'll go home and mobilize some experts to destroy Xuanyu Valley. Bai Zontang said sharply. At this time, he has to fully show his loyalty and respect to David. David is in trouble, and their Bai family should take action. No, after a few days, I will personally destroy this Xuanyu Valley. David waved his hand, and then continued to say to Bai Zontang, I may have something to go out these days, you take care of my family, and when I return, accompany me to destroy the Xuanyu Valley. After all, Bai Zontang is stronger than Chifeng. David plans to go to Hengshan for a few days. It is safer to leave the safety of Sonia and Ji Yu Linger to Bai Zontang. Now David is worried that Qin Feng will take revenge. Ji Yu Linger shouldn't be soft-hearted and let the tiger go back to the mountain. Mr. Chen, don't worry, as long as I have Bai Zontang's breath, I will never let anyone hurt Mr. Chen's family. Bai Zontang said confidently. After returning from Yaowang Mansion, David contacted Wudong. Wudong was accepting Hengshan rough stones in Hengshan. After receiving a call from David, he knew that David was back, and Wudong rushed back to the provincial capital directly from Hengshan. David used this period of time to refine some big repayment pills for Lin Tianyu, and he also refined the Juling Dan, but after eating a few Juling pills, David's strength did not increase much. With the improvement of realm, David's demand for spiritual energy has also increased exponentially. Early the next morning, Wudong rushed back, and took David to Hengshan again. Hengshan Mountain is not particularly far from Zhongbei, only a few hundred kilometers, but the entire Hengshan mountain range stretches for thousands of miles, spanning several provinces and cities. At the foot of Mount Heng, there is a small town called Shancheng. Originally, people here were sparsely populated, resources were scarce, and people's lives were very difficult. However, in recent years, with the popularity of Hengshan rough stone, and the price has become more and more expensive, the more and more people who come here to mine Hengshan rough stone. More and more, the mountain city has become prosperous. Chapter 475. Now the entire mountain city has several times more foreign population than the native population, and the mountain is full of large and small mines. The most popular entertainment venues in the mountain city are hotels, bars, and KTVs. Those who can afford the original stones are big bosses, so they are not afraid to spend money. Wudong went straight to eat and stopped at the entrance of a restaurant. "Mr. Chen, you must be hungry too, let's eat some food first, and then go back to the hotel to rest." David nodded and got out of the car with Wudong. The restaurant is not very big, but the facade is very well decorated and has an antique flavor. There is a big sign on it that says Shandong Restaurant. "Mr. Chen, don't think that this restaurant is not big, but it is the most popular restaurant here. Many people come to eat here. The big star Song Tai, as long as he returns to the mountain city, he will go to this restaurant to eat." Wudong and David introduced while walking. Entering the hotel, Wudong wanted to find a private room, but David stopped it. It was just the two of them, just eat whatever they wanted, no need to look for a private room. Looking for a more secluded place, Wudong specially ordered a few restaurant specialties. While waiting for the dishes, David deliberately glanced at the people eating at the restaurant, and found that there were actually several masters at the master level. It would not be surprising to see so many masters during the martial arts gathering in Tianfeng town, but how could there be so many masters in this mountain city? It's strange to say that even if I was busy before, I never saw so many people. During the few days I came to the mountain city, I saw several groups of strangers going up the mountain one after another. Too much. Seeing that David glanced at the people in the hotel, Wudong hurriedly explained. However, when David looked at these people, they didn't look like people who gambled stones. I saw that these people were all in groups of 3 or 5. "Is the rough stone of Mount Heng mined casually?" David asked Wudong. "That's not it. If you mine casually, it will be a mess. No one cares about it before, but now the entire area, the largest rough rock mining cave, has been occupied by the 3 families of Feng, Song, Liu, and others. Some of the small mines that the 3 companies despised were exploited by others, and Mr. Feng, who was at a disadvantage to Mr. Pei at that time, was one of them, and his mine was in the southeast, closest to the top of the mountain." Through the window, Wudong pointed to Hengshan, who was close at hand. "Oh." David nodded. Soon, the dishes came, and David suddenly stopped the waiter who was serving the dishes and said, "Dude, can I ask if something major happened in Shancheng? Why do I feel that many people are in a hurry?" David always felt that something was wrong. With so many master-level masters appearing, there should be something happening or about to happen here. "What's the matter? I'm just a waiter, I don't know." The waiter shook his head, but his eyes were dodging, obviously he knew something. "Dude, we are from out of town, just ask casually, no malice." David said, took out a stack of banknotes and stuffed it into the waiter's pocket. The stack of banknotes was several $1,000s. The waiter looked around, hesitated for a moment, and then said in a low voice, "I tell you, Hengshan has discovered another mineral vein, and said that it is full of gems. Now the 3 families of the Song family, the Feng family, and the Liu family are all I'm recruiting for horses. It looks like I'm going to compete for the new mines that I discovered. I'm afraid that the mountain city will soon be in chaos. I also heard it in a private room by accident. Don't say that I said it." After the waiter finished speaking, he left in a hurry. New mine. Wudong was taken aback. "I've been here for several days, why haven't I heard of it?" Chapter 476. David smiled slightly. "This kind of thing, the 3 major families will definitely not make a statement, so as not to provoke more people to fight for it." David now knows why so many masters suddenly appeared in Shancheng. It must have something to do with recruiting troops from the three major families. To know that a martial artist reaches the master level, it is very difficult to advance every step. Unless you have the support of the family industry, you can spend a lot of money to buy some spiritual medicines, medicinal materials, and other auxiliary exercises, otherwise, it will be difficult to break through. Therefore, many martial artists have no choice but to earn money to practice their skills by giving family care in nursing homes. The safety of the industry has formed a cooperative relationship, and everyone needs what they need. Now that these masters have come to the mountain city, it seems that the chips given by the three major families must be particularly attractive. Just when David and the others were eating, there was a sudden commotion. The two looked up and found a girl in a cheongsam with big sunglasses, covering most of her face, only the pointed chin and the small cherry mouth came out. Behind the girl were 4 bodyguards in suits, all with serious expressions, looking around as soon as they entered the door, as if they were facing a great enemy. Damn it, isn't this the big star Song Tai? Wudong's eyes widened suddenly, and the slap in his mouth was about to flow out. David looked at the girl, and his expression was in a trance for a while. The girl's body proportions were too good, especially when she was wearing a cheongsam. It showed her small waist to the fullest. A pair of snow-white feet stepped on high heels, just like it's the same as coming out of the painting, but the name is a little flattering. "Waiter, find a box," said a bodyguard behind the girl. "I'm sorry, the rooms are slow now, only the lobby is left," the waiter said helplessly. "Go find a way." The bodyguard's face turned cold, and he gave the waiter a fierce look. The waiter was horrified and stammered, "Really, there really isn't any more." "Okay, let's go in the lobby." After the girl finished speaking, she found a seat and sat down. "Miss, the master has explained that I won't let you." "Shut up, I'll go back after dinner." The girl seemed impatient, and the bodyguard didn't dare to speak up. Soon, the girl's food was served, and regardless of the hot eyes of the people around, the girl devoured it directly, and it was obvious that she really liked the food here. The 4 bodyguards behind her surrounded the girl, and everyone put their hands into their pockets, apparently with weapons hidden inside. It seems that the strength of the Song family is not small. David muttered to himself. These bodyguards all have guns hidden in their pockets. You must know that these are prohibited items. In this country, you can practice the exercises as you like, and no one will care about you. But when you have a hot weapon, the nature will change, and you must knowing that it is harder to get a gun now than to go to the sky. However, hot weapons like pistols are fine for ordinary warriors. If you really encounter a master-level master, the pistol will become useless. If you encounter David, the pistol will be no different from scrap metal. Song Zood, the patriarch of the Song family, used to be a famous entertainment company boss, with countless celebrity artists and too much money to count, but later he was investigated because some of his artists were rapists, which also affected the company, and was catching up with that. Hengshan stone has been hot for a few years, and this Song Zood went back to his hometown to open a mine, but his daughter is now a big star, and she is very famous. Wudong explained. David watched Song Tai while he was eating, but Song Tai seemed to be in a no-man's land. Chapter 477. Mr. Chen, if you like this woman, I will find a way to contact her agent. As long as you are willing to spend money these days, such a so-called big star is not the same as the escort girl. Seeing that David always looked at Song Tai, Wudong whispered. Shut up and eat. David glared at Wudong. Soon, Song Tai finished eating and walked out of the restaurant with his bodyguards. David and the others just finished eating and went out. I saw Song Tai got into a Bentley. After the bodyguard looked around, he hurriedly got in the car and drove away. David and the others also got in the car, started the car and left. Wudong drove the car and followed behind the Bentley, which made David a little strange. He asked Wudong, what are you doing? Why are you following others? Mr. Chen, you misunderstood, I'm not following her, the hotel I booked is right in front. Wudong hurriedly explained. When David heard this, he leaned on the seat and closed his eyes slightly to recharge his energy. Boom. There was a sudden loud noise, and then David and their car stopped quickly, and David also suddenly opened his eyes. What's going on? David asked in surprise. Mr. Chen, look quickly. Wudong was so scared that his face changed, and he pointed to the front. David looked and found that Song T's Bentley had been hit by a black unlicensed car and hit the roadside, and then a few people with machetes got off the black car. In the Bentley, Song Tai and several bodyguards were hit and dazed. Seeing someone rushed over with a machete, one of the bodyguards kicked the car door hard and took out the gun. But just after raising the gun, a white light flashed, and the bodyguard's gun-carrying hand was chopped off, and a shrill roar came from the bodyguard's mouth. But just shouting, the machete pierced the bodyguard's abdomen, and there was no sound in an instant. These guys with machetes moved very quickly. Although Song Ti's bodyguards had guns, the pistols couldn't exert any power in such close-range combat. In just a few dozen seconds, all 4 bodyguards died tragically, and Song Ti was also pulled out of the car. Who are you? Let go of me. Song Ti struggled hard, but it was useless at all. A guy took out a white towel to block Song Ti's mouth and nose, and soon Song Ti lost consciousness. These people stuffed Song Ti into the car, and when they were about to start the car, David got out of the car. In broad daylight, just rob people, do you still have Wong Fa in your eyes? The few guys were stunned for a moment, and when they saw David and Wudong, they suddenly showed fierce eyes. One of them pointed at David with a machete and said, "It's none of your business, boy, get away from me. This is a good time for heroes to save beauty, why don't you care about me?" David sneered and walked forward. When several guys saw this, they slashed at David with their knives. At first glance, it was a habitual criminal who murdered without blinking an eye. David took it easy and went up to meet him directly. Wudong saw this and was in a hurry. He couldn't do anything. He didn't know any martial arts. But he saw the pistol that fell on the ground. Although he didn't know martial arts, he could shoot. Wudong rushed up and picked up the gun, but when he raised the pistol and was about to shoot at several guys, he found that there was already no one left, and they all fell to the ground. Everyone's neck there is a deep bloodstain. David opened the car door and took Song Ti out as if nothing happened. Carrying Song Ti back to the car, David looked at Wudong, who was still dumbfounded, and said, "Don't drive yet." "Oh." Wudong hurriedly put the pistol in his pocket and got in the car. Chapter 478. Throw the gun. If someone wants to kill you, the gun in your hand will not save your life, it will make you die faster. David saw that Wudong put the gun in his pocket, so he said to Wudong. Wudong could only throw the gun out and drive back to the hotel. David carried Song Ti into the room and put him on the bed. Wudong couldn't help but glance at Song Ti, who was lying on the bed a few more times. His fair calves were exposed, he was hooked. "Mr. Chen, you can play first, I'm going out." Wudong knows that David is here, where does he have his share? "What am I playing?" David was taken aback and looked at Wudong. You save her, don't you just want to?" Wudong pointed at Song Ti and said stutteringly. David instantly understood that Wudong thought he was saving Song Ti to sleep with her. "What are you thinking about all day long? Find a bottle of ice water." David looked at Wudong, speechless for a while. Soon, Wudong found a bottle of ice water, and David poured it directly into Song Ti. With a bottle of ice water in his stomach, Song Ti opened his eyes leisurely. "What?" With a sudden scream, Song Ti sat up abruptly, looking at the surrounding environment as a hotel, looking at David and Wudong. Song Ti's face turned pale. "Who are you? What do you want to do to me? I tell you, even if I die, I won't let you succeed. If my dad finds out, he will definitely kill you." Song Ti glared at David and Wudong and said, "Miss Song, you misunderstood, Wudong wanted to explain. "What did I misunderstand? You took me to the hotel, didn't you do that dirty thing? Even if I die, I won't let you sully." Song Ti grabbed his collar tightly and yelled at Wudong. This time Wudong was speechless. At that time, he himself thought that David had rescued Song Ti and brought him to the hotel just to play with her. HMPH, is there nothing to say? I've known for a long time that you stinky men don't want my body. Song Ti gritted his teeth and said. Are you finished? David frowned slightly and asked Song Ti. What do you mean? Song Ti looked at David and asked. It's over, you can go. David pointed to the door and said expressionlessly. Song Ti was taken aback, and looked at David in surprise. You really let me go? The door is open, no one is stopping you, David said. Song Ti looked at David, then at Wudong, and finally got off the bed slowly and walked to the door. Seeing that neither David nor Wudong were moving, Song Ti hurried out of the door. Seeing that Song Ti was running faster than the rabbit, David smiled lightly and said to Wudong, let's rest early today, we'll go up the mountain tomorrow to see. Wudong nodded and went back to his room to rest. At this time, in the place where the car accident had just happened, dozens of people had already surrounded the entire accident site, and one of the middle-aged men with a gloomy face looked at the Bentley that had been wrecked. This person is Song Zood, Song Ti's father. When he brought people over, Song Ti had long since disappeared. Master, the eldest miss is missing, all 4 bodyguards are dead, not a single shot was fired. The housekeeper walked over to Song Zood and reported in a low voice. What are the identities of those people, have you found out? Song Zood asked, pointing to the corpses of the people whose throats were cut by David. No, but it is certain that these people are the ones who stopped the eldest lady's car, and they also killed the eldest lady's bodyguard. The machete left at the scene matches the wound on the bodyguard's body. The butler shook his head. Speaking of which, is there another group of people who stole my daughter? Song Zud's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a murderous look in his eyes. Chapter 479. It should be, and this group of people is very strong, at least they are masters. The wounds on the necks of these guys are the same, and the depth and length are not bad. It can be judged that it was done by one person, and it was still in a very short period of time. These people killed. The butler analyzed. The mantis catching the cicada oriole is behind, these guys are going to get serious with me. Song Zud gritted his teeth rattled. Master, do you suspect that the Feng family and the Lu family did it? The housekeeper asked. HMPH, except for the two of them, in the entire mountain city, whoever dares to attack my daughter's idea, you immediately send someone to inquire about the news. I believe that they have captured my daughter and will make conditions with me soon. Song Zud was filled with murderous aura, and his eyes were terrifyingly cold. Master, the eldest miss is home, he is home. At this time, a servant of the Song family hurriedly ran and said. What? Song Zud was overjoyed and rushed home immediately. When he got home, he saw Song Tai sitting in the living room, surrounded by many people, asking questions. Daughter, are you okay? Song Zud looked at Song Tai and asked incredulously. It's okay. Song Tai shook his head. How did you get back? Didn't someone rob you? Song Zud asked Song Tai with a confused look on his face at the moment. Someone robbed me. After killing the bodyguard, he stunned me. When I woke up, I found myself in the hotel with two young people beside me. Song Tai said truthfully. Then they didn't treat you well. Hearing this, Song Zud raised his heart in his throat. Song Tai continued to shake his head. After I woke up, I thought they wanted to do something to me, but those two didn't do anything and let me go. Master, is it possible that these two people are the ones who killed and kidnapped the young lady? In their view, they did not kidnap the young lady, but saved the young lady, or they would not let the young lady come back. The butler analyzed from the side. Well, it's very possible. If these two people really saved my daughter, I'll be rewarded. Song Zud nodded, then turned to Song Taidao. Do you know where those two people are? I only know that at the Excel Hotel, I forgot the exact room number. I was so panicked at the time that I didn't even look at it. Song Tai said. Miss, tell me what the two of them look like, and I'll bring someone to find them. The housekeeper asked Song Tai. I can't remember, I was scared to death at that time, but I'm sure I know it when I see it, I'll take you to find it. Song Tai got up and said. How can this work, you just got out of danger, you can't go. Song Zud immediately stopped Song Tai. Dad, the housekeeper will take someone with me. What are you afraid of? Don't worry. Song Tai didn't care. Master, don't worry, I will take good care of the young lady. The butler guarantees. With the assurance of the housekeeper, Song Zud nodded in agreement, and then Song Tai took hundreds of Song family members and went directly to the Excel Hotel. After searching layer by layer, and finally on the 4th floor, Song Tai remembered the room he was staying in. It's this one. Song Tai pointed to the room and said. The housekeeper winked, and someone stepped forward immediately and kicked the door open with a bang. Because it is still uncertain whether these two people really saved Song Tai, or if they have any intentions, so we must control it first. The door was kicked open, and the two of them rushed in first, but as soon as they rushed in, they all flew out and fell heavily on the ground. David had already noticed the difference and kept hiding behind the door. As soon as the two Song family members rushed in, David started it. Chapter 480. It's him, it's him. Song Tai immediately shouted when he saw David. And David frowned. I saved your life, but you brought people to avenge you. Song Tai opened his mouth, but didn't know how to refute it. Because David did not embarrass her and let her leave easily, Song Tai didn't know if it was him who was saved by David. However, the butler responded quickly and immediately smiled. Don't get me wrong, little brother, the eldest lady brought us here, just to meet you and ask about the situation. If you really saved the eldest lady, our master will reward you. What's the matter? Wu Dong, who heard the movement at this time, also rushed out. When he saw so many people, he was shocked, but after seeing Song Tai and the housekeeper beside him, he immediately understood. Over here. Butler Lu, don't get me wrong, Miss Song was really saved by us. At this time, Wu Dong hurriedly followed the housekeeper and said. Wudong often deals with rough stones, so he also has business dealings with the Song family and knows this housekeeper Lu. Master Wu, it's you. Butler Lu was a little surprised when he saw Wudong. Yes, I took Chen. Wudong just wanted to call Mr. Chen, but saw David wink at him, and immediately changed his words. My friend and I came to collect some rough stones, just happened to meet Miss Song in danger halfway. So we came to the rescue. Because Miss Song was still in a coma at the time, we had to take her to the hotel first and let her wake up before leaving. Young Master Wu, I naturally believe it. Thank you very much. Our master wants to see you, and he said that he is rewarded. Butler Lu said to Wudong. How could Wudong be in charge? He could only secretly look at David, and when he saw David nodded, he smiled and said, I just want to meet President Song and discuss the matter of the original stone. Master Wu, please. Butler Lu made a gesture of invitation. Wudong and David went to the Song family with the Song family. Song Zud was still waiting in the hall. Seeing Song Tai coming back, he got up and asked, Daughter, have you found those two people? That's not it, the two of them. Song Tai pointed at Wudong and David said. Master Wu. Song Zud said with a surprised look after seeing Wudong. Mr. Song. Wudong smiled slightly. Did you save my daughter? Song Zud's face was full of disbelief. Exactly, we saw that Miss Song was dazed and stuffed into the car, so we rescued Miss Song. Wudong nodded. Song Zud frowned slightly. Master Wu, if I remember correctly, you don't seem to be skilled in martial arts, right? Wudong smiled awkwardly. Yes, I don't know martial arts. It was my friend who saved Miss Song, and he did it. Wudong pointed at David and said. Song Zud looked at David, his face was full of disbelief. Those robbers were masters at first sight. If they could cut their throats and kill them instantly, they must be masters. They should be masters, but David in front of him was only in his 20s. How could it be a master? Little brother, what's your surname? Although he had doubts in his heart, Song Zud asked politely. David. David replied lightly. It turned out to be Brother David. Since you saved my daughter, you can say whatever you want. If you buy rough stones, I can give you half the price. Song Zud said generously. After all, when Song Tai was finally released, it was Wudong and David who he saw. No matter if they were helping each other out, they didn't have bad intentions for their daughter. Half price. Wudong got excited when he heard it. If they buy the rough at half price, they can make a lot of money, which is a lot of money. Chapter 461. David smiled.